We often hear that anxiety is the defining problem of our current lifestyle, the one of our generation. The anxiety has become this giant monster we all have to face, right? But the reality is that it's been there all along. It's an emotion that has existed for thousands of years, yet it's only in recent times that it has become such a widespread problem. And on the individual level, what happens is what I call an anxiety blockage. You cultivate this ideal life in your mind, but the reality is far from it. And the gap between expectation and reality fuels a lot of anxiety and creates the blockage. In my case, anxiety has always been a part of my life, and it's a feeling I carry with me most days. And that's the reason why today I felt like it would be helpful to share with you the 4 main lessons that have completely changed my relationship with anxiety and helped me get over the blockage. The thing to understand first about anxiety is that it's as much a physical issue as it is a psychological issue. And if there's one thing to start with, you need to make sure that your body is functioning properly. You need to fuel your body with the right food. You need to use your body to its full capacity by exercising regularly. And you need to allow it to recover by getting proper sleep. And if your current lifestyle looks something like waking up at 11, late for work, skipping breakfast just to sit in an overcrowded subway, and spend 8 hours in front of a computer, then your anxiety is supposed to be telling you that something's wrong, right? Because the truth is that if your lifestyle is chaotic, it's no surprise that you're facing crippling anxiety on a daily basis because your body is in survival mode. You're just waking up every day to work on external goals that are not yours, and therefore you're never going to close the gap between you and your actual personal goals. Anxiety is not the enemy. Anxiety is just an alarm system. It's being triggered because your body is under constant stress and it doesn't have what it needs to be able to manage it. Think of it as an experiment, right? Take a rat and put it in a cage with 100 other rats. Keep it stimulated with screens when it's supposed to sleep and feed it with processed foods. Then just watch what happens. The rat probably won't live that long. It's an extreme example. But the scenario is the reality, at least perceived reality, for a lot of college students or young adults in the workplace. And I was no exception. I felt like I was in a cage when I was right out of college. Just waking up every day, waiting to finally work on the things that really matter to me, but that they never happened when I was working in 9 to 5. Because I was just realizing that none of that is going to happen. And then on top of that, I was burning my body out. So the first piece of advice is clear. Fix your body. Your mind can't do all the work if you're not even meeting your basic human needs. And the most effective way I've found to do that is to make going to the gym a habit. It works well with all types of exercise, but going to the gym has been nothing but a blessing, right? Physical exercise is doing the strongest natural remedy for anxiety that you can find out there. And in my mind, what makes going to the gym so effective is the fact that it forces you to be present in a stressful but safe and controlled environment. It's a deliberate way to put yourself under pressure, but for your own good. This is by far the most important piece of information and advice that I'm going to give you today. And if the gym isn't for you, again, find a sport that you enjoy, or at least that you don't hate, and engage in it regularly. I suggest like a frequency of at least every 2 days if you want to see the real benefits and be able to escape mentally, because you need to make it a habit, and that's why it has to be frequent. The cool thing about the gym specifically is that it comes with a set of principles about nutrition and recovery too, and you need those in order to get the real results. So it's more of a lifestyle, and I find that to be really helpful to get out of the anxiety blockage that you might be experiencing, that I was experiencing. And I designed the program just for that. So if you want to know exactly how to adopt fitness and going to the gym as a lifestyle, transform your body as a result, check the link for Fitness Autonomy. It's going to be in the description. The crazy thing about anxiety is that even though it can be triggered by your environment, it's ultimately self-induced, which means that it's coming from you. No one's pouring anxiety into you here, and it's something that your brain creates even if you don't want it to. So why does it do that? Why would it make you experience such an unpleasant feeling? Well, it's because your brain senses that something is off, something's wrong. There's a potential threat or a problem that needs solving, and it rings the alarm because it wants you to know that something's off. The problem really arises when this alarm system becomes too sensitive, triggering anxiety when it's not really necessary. If you think about it, anxiety has been adapted for life in the savannah, If a lion jumped out of a particular type of bush, you'd be anxious whenever you saw that type of bush and you would just avoid it altogether. But in modern life, this same anxiety system gets triggered when you have an important meeting or a paper to hand out. Now, people respond to different triggers. For me, a group of people staring at me is the equivalent of a lion jumping out of a bush. That being said, the lion isn't real though, and that's so important. There is no immediate danger whatsoever. My mind is making me believe that there is, but there's not. And this realization that you need to have for yourself, this insight, holds immense power. Once you understand that anxiety isn't a reaction to real and immediate threat like it would be for fear, which is the emotion that's supposed to answer to that particular type of scenario. So anxiety is an emotion, and just like all other emotions, it comes from within. It's triggered. But what about the source of that anxiety? What about the lion? Should you do anything about it? And that's a good question. Sometimes you might have had just a little bit too much coffee and didn't sleep well. And so you start to feel anxious in traffic, thinking about work and what's going to happen or whatnot. And that's okay. That's okay anxiety, right? In that case, that anxiety is likely stronger than what it should be because of physiological things that are happening in your body. And while you should acknowledge it, you also need to recognize that it's probably just amplified by your lack of sleep and you just got too much caffeine in your system. But in most instances, when we're talking about the anxiety blockage, anxiety is actually useful and you should listen to it. Because if you hate your job and you feel like you're wasting away years of your life, waking up every morning feeling anxious, then it is probably a good indicator telling you that you need to change your situation. That's exactly how I felt, by the way, when I started my first 9 to 5, just right out of the university. I was anxious to get to work every day. I couldn't figure out why. I was stressed out most of the time until I just realized that the anxiety was guiding me, okay? And I just needed to listen to it, or be willing to at least. And that's what led me to quit that job and start my own business, helping people transform their physiques and their lifestyle. But remember one thing, being anxious means that you care. The opposite of anxiety isn't feeling good, it's being indifferent. Yes, it's unpleasant. Nobody wants to feel anxious, but it's also a good indicator. An emotion that's been designed to guide you, and it's your duty to sit with it and wonder, why am I feeling so anxious? Anxiety comes from within, and that's also where you'll find the key to overcoming the blockage. So you have to turn inward. Don't make the mistake of telling yourself that it's fine, that things will get better, and that you can just live your life as it is without paying attention to your anxiety. Avoiding anxiety only feeds it. The more you try to suppress it, the bigger it gets, and soon it will be too overwhelming to hide away. Think about it. If anxiety is an alarm system, you can do whatever you want to. Try to duct tape it, close the door, but you'll still hear the piercing sound of it from afar. Now, depending on your personality and your coping mechanisms, avoidance can take different forms for different people. For me, it was procrastination. But when I'm talking about procrastination, I'm talking about extreme procrastination, okay? Not doing the dishes, not showing up to school, not getting out of bed, not being able to stop playing video games, total avoidance of the life that was going on. This heavy procrastination cost me much more than just time, because it destroys your sense of competence and self-confidence, as you just keep telling yourself that, you'll do all these things later, but you end up doing none of them. So your own brain just ends up not trusting your own words. That's for me, that's procrastination. I've seen friends take the route of self-destruction through usually self-medication, whether it was with alcohol or drugs. They seem to just need to drink until they can't feel the anxiety anymore, until the part of their brain that signals fear just shut down. This is possibly the worst idea possible, because not only you're heavily avoiding the real issue, the anxiety, but the very things that you're using to escape from it will become very problematic very soon. Because if you use alcohol in a social setting, because, it's kind of accepted socially, but you do that in order to escape the underlying anxiety that you're feeling, and you do that long enough, you'll start to feel the need to self-medicate outside of social events. And that's when it becomes truly dangerous. And if there's one insight that I'd like to share with you, it's this. Avoiding anxiety will never solve the issue. It can only make it worse. But you probably already know that. I think ultimately you have to be ready to put in the work required to start entangling your relationship with the feeling. Now, one thing to be clear about, the opposite of shielding yourself from anxiety isn't to act impulsively on it. Don't fall into that trap either, right? The solution is to treat anxiety like you treat any other emotion. Acknowledge it, listen to it, and be genuinely willing to understand what your brain is trying to tell you based on this information. This may be difficult to do right now, and that's okay. But the first step is just to be willing to do the work. The willingness occurs on both a conscious and an unconscious level. Because remember, you cannot trick your own brain. It knows everything about you. And if you do that, if you really take a look at this negative feeling and listen to what the alarm is trying to tell you, things will get better very quickly. Just because you think about something doesn't mean that it is true or that it's going to happen. This rule applies to anxiety too. Just because you're thinking about something doesn't make the catastrophic scenario in your mind any more real. And when it comes to anxiety, often find myself stuck in these, what it seems to be internal loop of anxiety. You know what? Something's important coming up, like big decision that you have to make, and you feel trapped in an anxiety loop that's just endless. You think about it every second of the day. It occupies all the space in your mind, making it impossible to concentrate on something. It's just always there, omnipresent. During these periods, you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, and your body is under a lot of stress. And for a long time, I didn't know how to respond to these loops, what to do or what not to do, in fact. Now I know that when this happens, what I need is distance. I need to create a gap between myself and the emotion to avoid getting sucked into it and lose my objectivity. Now, learning how to distance yourself from anxiety is the next step after acknowledging it. And it's like a dance, right? You need to take a close look at it and then step back to be able to see the full picture. This can be tricky because it's really hard to differentiate yourself from your thoughts and emotions. But it's also a skill, which means you can improve with practice. You've got to learn how to challenge your judgment and be objective. You got to test the rationality behind your thinking process. Don't believe that your thoughts are the things that define you or that they're universal. They're not speaking the truth. They're flawed and highly based on your perception and your emotions and your memories. So when you feel getting stuck in an anxiety loop, when you feel like there's a blockage and you can't think straight anymore, take a step back. Stop engaging frenetically. Close the laptop for a second. Just take a walk, go outside, pick up a book, go on a hike. Stop using your phone so much. Expose yourself to the anxiety and be willing to listen to it. But when it's time, you also got to leave it alone for a little bit. Long enough for you to be able to adopt a new perspective on it and to understand what it's trying to tell you. So anyway, I hope this helps. Trust the process.